I was really looking forward to coming up and visiting everyone, but I'm still glad that we can connect virtually and be together this way. So, and thanks to all the Big Stone Gap folks who have tuned in last minute. Several of you have sent me messages, so thanks for watching all across town here too. I'm going to start off here with a Carter family tune, kind of explore just a little bit of various musical traditions from all across Southwest Virginia and across the Appalachian region. This is, like I said, an old Carter family tune. It's one of my favorite songs because it's about the Commonwealth of Virginia, which we're so lucky to reside in. And it's a beautiful place, and this is a beautiful song. And I'm going to be playing guitar in the style of Mother Maybelle, or attempting to. I don't know that anybody can really do it justice the way that she did, but of course Mother Maybelle was famous for creating the Carter scratch in her guitar playing. So she used a combination of her thumb and most of the time her index finger to do a combination of melody and rhythm at the same time. So she really revolutionized guitar playing for the whole world right here in Southwest Virginia. So this is called Longing for Old Virginia. In the green fields of Virginia, dear, I met you, where the roses red and white around us bloom. When I held you in my arms and gently kissed you, the robin sang the sweetest song he knew. I'm longing for old Virginia, and I'm hoping this soul within ya is longing for me too. To Virginia, just like the ivy, my heart clings ever true. And I reckon in the spring I'll bring a little ring to old Virginia and you. Though tonight I'm far from you in old Virginia, I love you as I did that day in June. And when springtime comes again to old Virginia, I'll build a little cottage just for two. I'm longing for old Virginia, and you. And I'm hoping this soul within ya is longing for me too. To Virginia, just like the ivy, my heart clings ever true. And I reckon in the spring I'll bring a little ring to old Virginia and you. And I reckon in the spring I'll bring a little ring to old Virginia and you. All right, thank you all very much. Well, thanks again if you're just tuning in here for the New College Institute event. Like I said, I'm really glad to be here today. I hate that we're not doing this in person, and I hate that we can't all be together, but excited that we can still connect virtually. And I'm just going to be playing a whole host of songs and telling a little bit of history about the music from Southwest Virginia and from the Crooked Road region. We really live in a hotbed of music. I don't think it's something that a lot of us take for granted, I believe, on a pretty regular basis. But all across Southwest Virginia, there have been hundreds and hundreds of musicians who have had a major influence on American music in some way. You can definitely say that for the Carter family. I'll do a song here that comes from Big Stone Gap. That's where I'm from, and that's where I'm performing from this morning, here in my dining room, which is right in downtown Big Stone. This is a song that was written in 1913 and is based on a novel that was written here in the town of Big Stone Gap. It was written in 1908 called The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. It was written by John Fox Jr. And it's such an important piece of local history and local identity. It is sometimes a problematic story. John Fox Jr. Did not shy away from playing on a lot of stereotypes of Appalachian people, from feuding and moonshining to some ancestral relationships. But still, even with all of its problems, it's a story that we, like I said, we find very important to kind of our identity here in this town. It spawned several movies and this song, and is still a story that's told over and over here in the downtown area with the Trail of the Lonesome Pine outdoor drama, which is the official outdoor drama of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we invite you to come see it. It's played every summer, every Thursday and Friday and Saturday night throughout the summer. And I cannot speak for whether that is true for the year 2020, the pandemic, but we hope that they'll be able to perform it at least part of the summer. So, but this is the song that was inspired by that, and it has appeared in a few of the movies, although I don't think the lyrics have ever been sung. It's just been played as an instrumental. So this is The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. On the mountain in Virginia stands a lonesome pine. Just below is the cabin home of that little girl of mine. Her name is June, and very, very soon she'll belong to me. For I know she's waiting there for me, neath that lone pine tree in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine. In the pale moonshine, our hearts entwine, where she carved her name and I carved mine. Oh, June, like the mountains I'm blue, like the pine. I am lonesome for you in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine. I can hear the tinkling waterfall far among the hills. Bluebirds sing oh so merrily to their mate with rapture trills. They seem to say your June is lonesome too, longing fills her eyes. She's waiting for you patiently where the pine tree sighs, in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine. In the pale moonshine, our hearts entwine, where she carved her name and I carved mine. Oh, June, like the mountains I'm blue, like the pine. I am lonesome for you in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine. Oh, June, like the mountains I'm blue, like the pine. I am lonesome for you in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine. Thank you. You don't have to clap at home, but I'm imagining that you are, because it helps me kind of get through the performance. Well, I'll grab my banjo here and do some tunes. Let's tune up here. The music of Southwest Virginia is so eclectic, and one of my favorite things about it is that it kind of hosts all these sort of mini genres within itself. You know, we have a strong ballad tradition in the Appalachian Mountains, so there's that strong tradition of just singing a song a cappella, usually a story song, one that's been passed down for generations. A lot of times they find their origins in the British Isles, but sometimes they come from other places. Sometimes they were born here in the States. We have also a strong tradition of music around dance and around string band music. That's typically made up of fiddle tunes and banjo tunes that have come from really all across the place. We have some tunes that were created here in the United States. A lot of our fiddle tunes, again, find their origins in Europe and the British Isles, but then we also have a major African influence on our music. The banjo is actually an African instrument, descendant of African instruments. And a lot of the playing style can still be traced back to how Native Africans play sort of the cousin instruments of the banjo that still exist in African nations today. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing that much of the Appalachian region's culture, in terms of music and dance and even food and storytelling and so on, is really just a kind of a microcosm of American culture, in that it's just made up of all the world's cultures. You know, every culture and every group of people who've passed through the region have given us something culturally to our music. So I'm going to play you two tunes that go by the same name here. They both go by the tune, Did You Ever See the Devil, Uncle Joe? But they are slightly different versions of each other. The first version is a version that was played by the Powers family, who was a string band. Really common was the family string band in the early 1900s through the 1930s and even into the 40s. And the Powers family was a family string band from around Scott County, Russell County. They were kind of there on the county line. Callan Powers played fiddle, and his son played banjo, and his daughters played guitar and ukulele. The ukulele was a highly popular instrument in traditional music in the 19-teens and 1920s because of the Hawaiian craze that hit the United States when Hawaii was first explored. So, and then the second version of this tune is actually a version of this tune that we can trace back. It is the same melody that is played here in the United States that's also played in Northern Ireland and is also played in Northern Scotland. If you know much about world history or just European history, you'll know that a lot of folks who were living in Scotland and Northern Scotland were at one time or another more or less forced to migrate into what's now the Ulster Plantation, what was the Ulster Plantation, which is now the Ulster region of Northern Ireland. And so they took a lot of their music and cultural traditions with them there. And then just a few generations later, a lot of their descendants would move from the Ulster area of Ireland into the colonies and then the United States. And yeah, spread out all across the United States, but of course a strong lineage of those people settled all throughout the Appalachian region. So they brought this tune with them too. This tune here in America is called Did You Ever See the Devil, Uncle Joe? But most often in Ireland and Scotland, it's called either Miss or Mrs. MacLeod's Reel. So MacLeod is a strong Scottish name. So. Short-tailed robin and a long-tailed crow. Did you ever see the devil on Joe? Did you ever see the devil on Joe? Did you ever see the devil on Joe? One Coalfield in a shoestring bow. Did you ever see the devil on Joe? 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 Joe, did you ever see the devil on Joe? So that's, did you ever see the devil, Uncle Joe? On the clawhammer banjo. So look over my list here, see what else we got for today. Yeah, so I'll do this tune here. This is a song that actually comes from Tennessee. This is an old tune that was made popular by one of the first stars of the Grand Ole Opry, Uncle Dave Macon, who was a banjo player who had just a mass number of variations for how to play the banjo. He played clawhammer style, he played a lot of early finger picking style, he also did all kinds of acrobatics, of swinging his banjo around and keeping it playing as he swung it up under his leg or over his head. But this was a big hit for him, this song. It's called Buddy, Won't You Roll Down the Line. It's a really fun song. You would never know it's about kind of this tragic incident in American history. Excuse me. It comes from the community of Coal Creek, Tennessee. And of course, there was a coal mine there on Coal Creek. And the miners had begun to organize for better working conditions, better pay, and so on. And of course, the company really resisted that. They saw that as kind of a threat to the company. So, of course, a dispute started, and strikes at that time in the early 1900s, even up into recent history, strikes could be very violent. We haven't really seen that in the last 20 years or so, but even into recent history, coal mining strikes could be very violent. And this is one that became very violent because when the miners went on strike, the company struck a deal to bring in convict labor out of the prisons of Tennessee to mine coal. And of course, that angered a lot of people. Unfortunately, the miners lost their strike. However, they did influence the next governor of Tennessee who was elected. They influenced his party platform to outlaw the use of convict labor in the private sector. So there was a plus, a positive that came out of all of this. So it's raining today, and my banjo's not very happy about it. Yeah, and this is a tune that is on my new album, which is coming out here very soon, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go along. So this is Buddy, Won't You Roll Down the Line. Way back yonder in Tennessee, they leased the convicts out, sent them in the coal mines against free labor stout. Free labor rebelled against it too, and it took some time. But when the lease was in effect, they made them rise and shine. But it would roll down the line, roll down the line. Yonder comes my darling, coming down the line. But it would roll down the line, roll down the line. Yonder comes my darling, coming down the line. Every Monday morning, they get them up on time. March them down the Lone Rock, said look into that mine. March them down the Lone Rock, said look into that hole. The very next thing the captain says, you better get your coal. Let it go to roll down the line, roll down the line. Yonder comes my darling, coming down the line. Let it go to roll down the line, roll down the line. Yonder comes my darling, coming down the line. Beans they are half done, the bread is not so well. The meat it is all burned up, and the coffee's black as heck. But when you get your task done, you'll gladly come to call. And anything you get to eat, it tastes good done or wrong. But it wants to roll down the line, roll down the line. Yonder comes my darling, coming down the line. But it wants to roll down the line, roll down the line. Yonder comes my darling, coming down the line. The bank boss is a hard man, a man we all know well. And if you don't get your task done, he's gonna give you hallelujah. Carry you to the stockade, and on the floor you'll fall. The very next thing the captain says, you better get your coal. But he wants to roll down the line, roll down the line. Yonder comes my darling, coming down the line. But it wants to roll down the line, roll down the line. Yonder comes my darling, coming down the line. Yonder comes my darling, coming down the line. Thank you. Switch around here again. Southwest Virginia's music of course, has had a massive amount of influence on the world's music, particularly in country music and bluegrass music. A lot of people, well, I don't want to say it's a mistake, but a lot of people mistakenly said that all music in the Appalachian region is bluegrass music. When that's not really true. There's a very large kind of mixture of all these related genres happening. A lot of people refer to Appalachian music as old-time music. You'll hear it referred to, or as folk music a lot. It is, in my mind, it's very much a type of folk music, music made by the people. But yeah, most often I refer to it as old-time music, or I just like to say Appalachian music, because then you get to kind of encompass all sorts of different things. And of course, going back to some of those musicians who've had such a massive influence on American music, and particularly country music, was the Carter family from Scott County, Virginia, which is just the next county over from where I'm at, down in a little area known as Macy Springs, which is over in the Hiltons, just up past the Hiltons community in Scott County. That's where most of the Carter family was raised. The original Carter family was Sarah and her husband AP, and then Sarah's cousin Maybelle Carter. They were a trio, and they began recording in 1927 and had a tumultuous career up into the 30s and 40s. And then after their split, Maybelle had 3 daughters that she took on the road. And that's where a lot of people get their introduction to Carter family music and kind of the wider world, as they remember Mother Maybelle's daughters, particularly June Carter, married Johnny Cash. And so all through the 70s, they were on his television show a lot, June, Helen, and Anita, and even Mother Maybelle. But Sarah and AP actually had 3 children too, who all went on to play music to some extent. And 2 of them, Jeanette and Joe, of course, began what is known as the Carter Family Fold, which is a historic performance and dance venue in Scott County that typically has music every Saturday night. Of course, during the pandemic, things are a little different and they've not been open. And we hope that they'll be able to open sometime this year, so you can get down there and enjoy some great music. It's a wonderful place to play, but it's also just a great place to go listen to music, and it's so historic. There's several buildings there on the premises that are historic to the Carter family and their kind of legacy in music. If you want to learn more about the Carter family, perhaps one of the best written books about them is called Will You Miss Me When I'm Gone by Mark Zwanitzer. I think is how you say his last name. Hope I said that correct. It's a great book because it traces even a little further back than Sarah and AP and Maybelle and their families, so musicians that came before them, their grandparents, up into modern history. You know, there's still descendants of the Carter family who are my age who are playing music. So it's really incredible to see. They really are a true example of how music has been passed down in a family for hundreds of years. So really awesome. I'll do a couple of tunes that I consider Carter family tunes, mostly because I heard Mother Maybelle play them on recordings. Like I said, in the 40s, she took her daughters and kind of hit the road, and they became Grand Ole Opry stars. A lot of folks don't know, but Mother Maybelle and the Carter sisters were members of the Grand Ole Opry. And when they first kind of set out making old-timey country music, they met a guitar player who had some really slick guitar playing licks and was having a really hard time getting a job in the country music scene, particularly around Nashville. A lot of people didn't want to hire him. And Mother Maybelle's husband, Eck Carter, he convinced her and the girls to bring this guitar player on. He had a lot of faith in him as a guitar player, and that guitar player was actually Chet Atkins, who of course would then help invent the Nashville sound and completely change the face of country music. He would be one of the ones kind of responsible for the slicked up, polished sound that we associate with country music today. And that sound put a lot of acts like the Carter family out of business, or kind of pushed them down to the lower circuits of more of a folk music scene than the major country music scene. So I always find it so coincidental, I guess, or ironic that the first family of country music, they were the ones who gave the man who would completely alter country music. They were the first ones to give him a job. So I mentioned that Mother Maybelle was very famous for taking the Carter scratch and playing the guitar in that way. She also kind of revolutionized the auto harp. There were a couple of other players who were taking the auto harp. That's what this instrument is here, if you're not familiar with it. A little bit about the auto harp is it began as a tabletop instrument. You would lay it flat, and it was a parlor instrument. Most often in the Victorian era, you would stand and kind of play it, just strum its strings and play little parlor songs of the day in the Victorian period there in the late 1800s. And it kind of stayed a lap instrument even into its sort of early transition into country music. Sarah played it on her lap or as a tabletop instrument in the Carter family, and there were others that did the same. And then in the 30s, 40s, there were some players, particularly some folks in Middle Tennessee, who were kind of picking the auto harp up and holding it and playing up on the larger section of strings and beginning to mess around with how to get melodies out of it. There had been other attempts at that. A great auto harp player from Southwest Virginia's Kilby Snow, who he actually turned his auto harp up on its side and played kind of a mixture of the two styles and was able to get the melody by pushing these chord buttons in different orders. But Maybelle kind of perfected her own style. She took that Carter scratch style that she played on the guitar and played a similar movement on the auto harp and kind of combined a lot of those styles to where she could play the rhythm and the melody of songs. And this is a instrumental piece that she did on a couple of records called the Black Mountain Rags. Yeah, this instrument would ring out forever if we just let it. A little more about the auto harp. there's kind of a whole category of instruments that made their way into Appalachian music, and a lot of them are not that common anymore. The auto harp is probably one of them. Instruments that have more commonly been associated with female musicians, but also that have just been closely associated with kind of solo music, or maybe kind of quieter music, kind of focused on songs or balladry. So those instruments are like the auto harp and the dulcimer, and then we also have some other instruments like the bowed psaltery, which is kind of a triangular instrument that is played with a bow. It looks similar to an auto harp, but there's kind of a whole, like I said, a whole nother section of instruments that really, for one reason or another, didn't lend themselves that well to kind of the string band ensemble that we see develop in Appalachian music. So they're not quite as common, but they're still out there. And the auto harp's one of them. They're great instruments, and they sound beautiful, and they're lots of fun to play too. So I'll do you, speaking of ballads, I'll do you this ballad that Mother Maybelle and the Carter sisters recorded. This is an old-time ballad that's been sung in the Appalachian region for hundreds of years, and finds its origins in a ballad that comes from, some folks say Scotland, some folks say Ireland, but there's versions of it on both islands. A song called Love is Teasing. There's a lot of lyrical overlap between that song and this song that we most often call Fair and Tender Ladies here in the United States. So I'll play a little bit of this. This is a warning to single ladies. Be careful who you court. So. Come all you fair and tender ladies, take warning how you court your men. They're like a star on a summer's morning. They first appear and then they're gone. They'll tell to you some loving story, and they'll make you think that they love you well. And away they'll go and court some other, and leave you there in grief to dwell. I wish I was on some tall mountain where the icy rocks were black as ink. I'd write a letter to my false true lover, whose cheeks are like the morning dew. Oh, love is handsome, love is charming, and love is pretty while it's new. But love grows cold as love grows older and fades away like the morning dew. And fades away like the morning dew. Thank you. So it's Fair and Tender Ladies, version by Mother Maybelle and the Carter Sisters. You can still find a lot of their recordings available online, and there's a lot of great live recordings of them from the Opry and from other radio shows. You know, we all know about the Grand Ole Opry today, but in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even up into the 60s, there were just numbers of massive radio programs like the Grand Ole Opry. There was the Barn Dance in Richmond, Virginia. There was the WSL Barn Dance in the Midwest. There was the Louisiana Hayride. I think that was done in Shreveport, I believe. And there's some great recordings of them from a lot of those shows. There's some really great dialogue between Jim Carter and folks like Hank Williams, who were getting their start on the Louisiana Hayride. I can't speak today. So check those out. Those are all over wherever you can get music digitally, Apple Music or Spotify or what have you. So YouTube, you could probably get on YouTube, I guess. Southwest Virginia, like I was saying earlier, you know, its music has influenced a lot of larger genres, or even kind of fostered musicians of other genres. Specifically thinking about bluegrass musicians. A lot of people associate the music of the Crooked Road region with bluegrass, as they rightfully should. There's been just numerous stars come out of this region, and many folks who've influenced the bluegrass genre and the bluegrass world have grown up or have lived here in the Southwest Virginia region before. So one of those groups, one of my favorites, was Jim and Jessie McReynolds, who were actually born here in Wise County. They grew up around the Coburn area. And of course, they moved on and became a great big hit as kind of a brother duet in bluegrass music. But yeah, they got their start here. I started rambling. I can't remember what I was going to say about them. Oh, I remember. So their family is another one that has a long tradition of passing on music through different generations. They're Jim and Jessie, of course. Jim is still alive, I believe, or Jessie. Jessie is the one who's still alive. Jessie McReynolds plays mandolin and is still alive. And I think he's performing some, but not a lot. But they've had a career that obviously extended into recent history. However, their grandfather was present at the 1927 Bristol sessions. If you're not familiar with those, that's what a lot of people refer to as the Big Bang of country music. That was when Ralph Peer with the Victor Talking Company was exploring the South looking for hillbilly acts of the time to record what would later become the country music industry. So the Carter family was there at the 1927 sessions, the Stoneman family, whom a lot of people are familiar with. But yeah, also Jim and Jessie's grandfather took a string band from Wise County over there. I think their name was something like the Bull Mountain String Band, I believe. And they recorded a couple of fiddle tunes. So they've, had a large and long influence on country music as well. So. Let's see. Nobody's happy that it's raining today. All right, so I'll do you a song here that Jim and Jessie recorded. This is not one that they wrote. It's an older song. But I love this song so much. I'm kind of an old soul at heart and love the old ways of living life and love the old ways of doing things in life. And although modernity does offer some great things like Zoom concerts with all of you all, it's kind of bittersweet because it means something else is probably gone to the wayside so that this technology could come into play. And that's what this song is about. This might be a little extreme though, because I never had to ride in a wagon to go to school or to go to church or anything like that. But this is about that kind of transition from wagons to cars and what that meant for the world. So this is called When the Wagon Was New. Just an old rusty wagon that's left to rot away. It's the one we used to ride in back in the good old days. People were all so friendly, everybody was so free, and riding in a brand new wagon was something to see. Oh, I can still see my daddy sitting on a wagon seat. Mama in her old sunbonnet, well, she looked so nice and neat. Children all in the wagon, Grandma and Grandpa too. Said we used to go to church on Sunday when the wagon was new. Red wheels on the wagon and the body it was green, but we was just as happy as riding in a limousine. People would come and gather round from all the mountainside. Take a look at our brand new wagon and I'll take a ride. Oh, I can still see my daddy sitting on a wagon seat. Mama in her old sunbonnet, well, she looked so nice and neat. Children all in the wagon, Grandma and Grandpa too. Said we used to go to church on Sunday when the wagon was new. Well, the automobiles are here now, and the wagon days are through. Aeroplanes are humming, good neighbors are so few. People are all so busy, it's the money that takes you through. But we didn't need much money when the wagon was new. Oh, I can still see my daddy sitting on a wagon seat. Mama in her old sunbonnet, well, she looked so nice and neat. Children all in the wagon, Grandma and Grandpa too. Said we used to go to church on Sunday when the wagon was new. We used to go to church on Sunday when the wagon was new. Yeah, so a little early bluegrass song there for you. And of course, you can't think about bluegrass in Southwest Virginia and not think about the good doctor, Dr. Ralph Stanley, who was, a monumental character in just American music in general, but especially here in Southwest Virginia in bluegrass and country music. He lived just up the road in Dickinson County, just a couple next county up, north of me. And you would see him around all the time, especially when he was older. He wasn't touring as much. He loved Applebee's. He loved to go to Applebee's in Norton, so you'd see him there a lot. And perhaps probably more of his wife. They liked to shop at Belk, Parks Belk in Norton. And so one of my favorite memories is going into Belk, and you would see his wife walking around shopping, and you wouldn't see Ralph anywhere. But when you kind of walk through the makeup section, he would kind of be in one of the makeup chairs, kind of holding court, just watching everything. He wasn't getting makeup done. He just liked to sit there and rest and I guess just wait out the shopping experience. He wasn't a shopper, evidently. But of course, Ralph Stanley is another one of these musicians who had this just massive career that spanned so many years. He began learning music as a young boy from his mother. His mother was Lucy Stanley Smith. She was a banjo player, and she played primarily at kind of local functions, square dances and pie sales and you know, just any kind of local event that was being hosted in the community, she was typically playing at. And she played at home a lot and taught both Ralph and Carter to play music to some extent. And that is a really interesting part of traditional music, and particularly Appalachian music. For a long time, the stars that we really think about were particularly men, folks like Ralph Stanley, who, you know, kind of dominated their music and kind of dominated the genre that they were in or the style of music that they were playing. But a common thread between all of those male superstars was that they learned music from their mother, and their mothers were most often music makers only at home, maybe out at some community events, but most of the time at home. Because of course, our viewpoints and perspective on women's roles in American life has changed quite drastically over the last 100 years for the better. But of course, at one time, it was not seen as a ladylike activity for women to be out playing music, particularly in public. So just very interesting that, you know, he's one of these many, many country music stars who was influenced so heavily by his mother's music. She played clawhammer banjo, and Ralph learned to play clawhammer. He played a very unique style. He also played a unique style of three-finger or bluegrass style banjo playing. And of course, he and his brother Carter had a band in the early days, the Clinch Mountain Boys. And they were really starting to hit the bluegrass scene right as bluegrass was really developing as a genre in the late 30s into the early 40s. And unfortunately, Carter passed away very early on in life, but he left a large influence on the music and on Ralph. And I think from reading some of Ralph's writings and his autobiography, he really struggled after his brother passed away as to whether or not to continue making music. But thankfully, he chose to get back into it and kind of take the band, and he became the leader of the band. And they had a very successful career all throughout music. And of course, he's one of these that's kind of seen several little bumps in his life. And most folks associate Ralph Stanley, probably in today's time period, with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, the hit movie from the 2000s, which he sang and played in, or played on the soundtrack of. So I'll play a couple of banjo tunes that come from Ralph Stanley. These are tunes that he learned from his mom. Just to keep down trouble, don't believe all. I got a mule to ride. I ain't got no saddle, but I'm raring to go. Shout, little shout, shout, want the world to shout now. Shout, little shout, your best, your grandmother's gone to rest. How many nickels will it take to see Miss Lula's butt shake? It'll take a nickel, it'll take a dime to see Miss Lula's butt shine. Shout, little Lula, shout and sing, your grandmother's gonna swing. I'm going to Rocky Island, oh honey, oh. See my candy darling, you know I love her so. Dark clouds rising, shore side of rain. Put your old gray bonnet on, sweet little Liza Jane. I'm going to Rocky Island, oh honey, oh. See my candy darling, you know I love her so. See my candy darling, you know I love her so. Alright, so there you go. A couple of Ralph Stanley tunes. That was A Mule to Ride, I've Got a Mule to Ride, Shout Little Lula, and Rocky Island.
Awesome. Well, that has been great, Tyler. And do you want to stop and maybe take a break for questions right now?
Sure.
Awesome. Well, guys, if you have any questions for Tyler, go ahead and put them in the chat section. I just have a couple questions for you while we're waiting for our guests to ask theirs. So what got you started into Appalachian music?
Sure. What did get me started? It seems like a long time ago. Well, I've always been interested in music. I started learning the guitar when I was really young, 5 years old, 6 years old, and I really liked country music. I grew up listening to country music, but I did not like practicing the guitar at 5 or 6 years old. But as I went through school, excuse me, I stayed involved with music. I was in the chorus or the choir for several years, and when I got into late middle school, early high school, it kind of became apparent to me that I wasn't going to follow the same path as most young guys do and join the football team. So I needed another extracurricular activity. So I wanted to get back into music, and I started playing guitar again, taking guitar lessons. And it was the same thing. I was learning a lot of country music. That's what I liked. But then I attended camp that happens here in Big Stone Gap every summer at Mountain Empire Community College called Mountain Music School. And that was really my first kind of introduction to traditional music. And kind of the light bulb clicked of like, oh, like we live here and all of this music is here. And this is what I want to play. Like, this is interesting to me. And I don't know. I've always kind of been a nerd, so I thought it was really cool that all this music was from here. So yeah, about the time I was probably 13 or 14, I really started getting into traditional music or Appalachian music. So
Awesome. And we have a question from Sarah. She said, could you demo some of the playing styles that you mentioned earlier so we can see what your fingers are doing?
oh, sure. So all of these instruments, all of the instruments associated with Appalachian music have various styles of playing. With the banjo, primarily what I do for the most part is what we call claw hammer, or what a lot of people call claw hammer. There's lots of other names for it out there. But it's done by, you're using the back of your fingernails and you're using your thumb to catch that fifth string. There's a lot of thought, there's been a lot of study by musicologists and ethnomusicologists that this fifth string is a drone string, which is a common occurrence on a lot of banjo-like instruments, but that kind of thought has been carried over to other instruments too. A lot of people say the dulcimer has drone strings because it's got strings that ring out every time you strum the dulcimer, or every time you strum the banjo, the string rings out. So you're just using the back of your fingernail to pick, strum, and then your thumb is catching that fifth string. There's lots and lots of different styles for playing the banjo though. There's hundreds of different ways to play the banjo. So I always say there's no wrong way to play the banjo because more than likely you're copying some style. But there's a lot of two-finger styles that exist in the Appalachian region. Some of those are like a combination of what we call up-picking, which is how Pete Seeger primarily played the banjo. A lot of people don't give Pete Seeger a lot of credit for playing the banjo because, well, there's a lot of people find him problematic for different reasons, but he actually played a really legitimate style of banjo playing that's found a lot in western North Carolina, an up-picking style, which operates like claw hammer, but instead of picking down with your fingernail, you're going to pick up with your finger. And then some people use a combination of like picking with their thumb and their finger to get different sounds. So the same can be said for all of these instruments. The guitar, a common way to play the guitar is just with a flat pick, and you're just doing what a lot of us refer to as a boom chuck rhythm, or some people will call it like cowboy rhythm or country rhythm. You're just a pick and a strum. But what Maybelle really did, she was using her thumb. She would often wear a thumb pick, and she would leave her finger bare. Sometimes she might wear a finger pick. But she would work the lower strings with her thumb, and then her finger would kind of continuously strum the treble strings to kind of get that sound of two guitars, even though there was only one. So she might play like. So yeah, there's a couple of different styles for you.
Awesome. So do we have any other questions for Tyler? I don't want to end this short because we do have until 1:30, but I just want to give Tyler a little break if he wants to take any questions. Okay. Sarah, do you have another question? Okay. Sarah said, thanks, that was very interesting. Awesome.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, well, I'll do a few more songs here and talk a little bit about sort of my current project and my new album that's coming out. I've been working on, thanks for dancing, Kathy. I've been working on a new project for a couple of years now, exploring coal mining music from here in Southwest Virginia. Of course, so much of life in the Appalachian region has been characterized or influenced by the different industries that have existed here over time. And of course, one of those major industries that has existed all over the Appalachian region, as far north as Pennsylvania and as far south as Alabama, is coal mining. And if you grow up in a coal mining community, it's hard to kind of understate just what a massive impact that industry has on life there. It's not something that we see that often in Appalachia today, as a lot of that industry has shifted to western states in the United States, and just kind of the mechanics around how the industry works has changed. Although the industry still maintains quite a lot of control, I guess you could say, over the regions that it operates in. But of course, things have changed quite drastically. For a long time, coal miners, of course, when you worked for a coal company, you didn't own your own house. They owned your house. You also didn't get paid in American currency. You got paid in company currency, or scrip, as it was called, and you could only spend that at the company store. They were very much a controlled environment. Coal mining communities were not like that today. Obviously, a lot of that stuff has been outlawed, thankfully, and conditions have really improved. But still, it's a dangerous line of work, and I always say that it's a really admirable line of work because it takes a lot of sacrifice to work in the coal industry. It's a sacrifice on your health, and it is a sacrifice often on your family. Your work schedule can be quite demanding. And then, of course, we know the environmental effects that come from mining coal. Mining coal is not exactly a clean process all the time, and burning coal is not a clean process all the time. So it is a big sacrifice to provide coal for the world. And because it's had such a massive and wide influence all over life, we have lots of music that is associated with the mining industry. And so I really wanted to explore some of that music, specifically from here in Southwest Virginia, but from some other places. So that song I sang earlier, Buddy, Won't You Roll Down the Line, that was one of those that really kind of caught my mind, caught my interest, because that tune is about the first attempt from coal miners to organize for better working conditions in a coal mine in the United States. So I'll do you some songs from that before we wrap up. Let's see, I'm going to start with this tune here. So this is a song, this is actually not one from Southwest Virginia, but it was a song that I loved so much. I was like, I've got to record this and I've got to include it on my album. This song began as a letter that was written by a coal miner's wife. Her name was Clara Sullivan. And they were a coal mining family from the Hazard area over in Perry County in eastern Kentucky, which is just about an hour's drive from where I'm at in Virginia. And they had been on strike for several months. And typically when a strike, this was also in the 60s, so typically when a strike was happening, well, even today when people go on strike, you don't get paid. So they had not been paid, and they weren't able to buy food or clothing or a lot of the necessities that they needed. They hadn't been able to do that for several months, not like they normally could. So Claire Sullivan, her son had written home. He was in the armed services, and he had written home and had asked for a copy of the newspaper because he wanted to know how the strike was going and what was happening with the strike. And they couldn't even afford the 15 or 25 cents for the newspaper that week. So she sat down and she wrote this letter to the editor and sent it to the editor of the paper, and it got published, and it got widely published. At that time, a much larger portion of America's energy came from coal, particularly mined in the eastern Kentucky, southern West Virginia, and Southwest Virginia regions. So when miners went on strike, it received a lot of attention because it very much affected the national consciousness around energy and energy process in the country. So it got widely spread, and a singer-songwriter and activist out in San Francisco, California, tweaked it a little bit and set it to music. Her name was Malvina Reynolds, or Malvina Reynolds. And this is called Mrs. Clara Sullivan's Letter. Dear Mr. Editor, if you choose, please send a copy of the labor news. For I've got a son in the infantry, and he'd be mighty glad to see that someone somewhere now and then thinks about the lives of the mining in Perry County. In Perry County and hereabouts, the miners simply had to walk out. It was long hours and substandard pay, and then they took our contract away. And now 14 months is a mighty long time to face the goons on the picket line in Perry County. I'm 26 years a miner's wife. There's nothing harder than a miner's life. There's no better man than a mining man. You couldn't find better in all this land, but the deal they get is a rotten deal. Mountain greens and gravy meal in Perry County. Live in a shack that the rain pours in, while the operators live high as sin. They drive Cadillac cars and drink like a fool, while our kids lack clothes to go to school. But Sheriff Combs, he's got it fine. He runs the law and he owns a mine in Perry County. I believe the truth will win out someday, that we're fighting for jobs at decent pay. Why, we're just tired of doing without. That's what this strike is all about. And it helps to know that folks like you are telling the story straight and true in Perry County. Thank you. I'll do just a couple more here. I'll end with a couple of originals. This is an instrumental piece that is on the album, which if you want some more information about the album, a single is out and now available on Bandcamp. If you go to Bandcamp and search Tyler Hughes, you can find the first single from the album. The whole album will be available for purchase within a few weeks. And then you'll also be able to stream it on Spotify and Apple Music and Pandora and YouTube and all those places very soon. I just received approval the other day for the music, so it'll be there as well. But you can also visit my website, tylerhughesmusic.com. Send me an email if you'd like to pre-order, or if you'd like to get a hard copy when we have them in hand. I'd be glad to send you one. So So this is just a little piece of an instrumental that's on the record called Dunbar. Several years ago, I worked for the Virginia State Park Service, and I was really fortunate to be a park interpreter. So I got to help give these guided tours around the region, and one of them we did was a coal community tour. So we toured through several of the historic coal camps here in Wise County. Excuse me. And we went to an abandoned bathhouse, so an old locker room, essentially, for the miners that was in the community of Dunbar. And it was just so eerie walking into this building. It hadn't been touched probably in 40 years. And I was shining a flashlight around, and there in the locker was just an old wash rag and an old bottle of dish detergent. That's what a lot of miners used to get coal dust off of their skin and out of the crevices in their fingernails and such. Just like an old, like a 1960s or 1970s bottle of dish detergent. And then there on the bench below it was a pair of rubber boots that just looked completely untouched. And that image, that always stuck with me. And so I wrote this tune thinking about that. This is called Dunbar. Just a little piece of one. I know we're running out of time here, so I guess, does anybody have any other questions or anything? I'll turn it back over to Brian. He's a good moderator.
All right, awesome. No, you're fine. That was awesome. Thank you again so much for taking time today to join us and do this awesome presentation. I will go through and unmute the participants just to see if they have any quick questions before we end today. All right, and we'll start with our first participant. Miss A. Brazil, do you have any questions for Tyler?
Thanks, Liz.
All right. Okay. Dave, do you have any questions for Tyler? Okay. Helen, do you have any questions for Tyler for today? Okay, not a problem. All right, Kathy, do you have any questions?
No, it was very good. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay. And Linda, do you have any questions for Tyler today? Okay. And Roger, do you have any questions for Tyler?
I'll just say thanks to Roger. Probably Debbie is there too for tuning in. They're good friends of mine up in Northern Virginia that I don't get to see very much. So
Awesome. All right. And Sarah, do you have any more questions for Tyler? All right. And what about W. Taylor? Do you have any questions? All right. Well, again, if you guys have any questions that you did not get to ask today, feel free to shoot me an email at bstanley@newcollegeinstitute.org, and I'll make sure Tyler gets those. And I'm sure he'd be glad to respond to you again. Check out his store and his website for his latest music and to download his songs. I'm going to do that later today because I love them and I can't wait to hear more.
thank you. Thank you all for tuning in, and thanks to the New College Institute for having me today.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys all for coming. And again, feel free to check out our YouTube page in about a week and a half to get that recording. It should be great. It should be up there again by the end, early June, maybe that last Friday of the first week of June, okay? And I just want to remind you guys of our next L.I.F.E event, which will be on June 3rd, and it's entitled Life Care Planning with the expert staff from the State and Elder Law Center here in Bassett and Danville, Virginia. For more information, just give me a call at 276-403-5605 or shoot me an email at bstanley@newcollegeinstitute.org. I hope you all stay safe, warm, dry, and I hope to see you guys soon. And thank you again, Tyler, for joining us today.
Thank you. We'll see y'all soon.